So as I mentioned, I decided I was going to be a high school counselor. So I started out majoring in psychology and then decided I wanted to be a high school teacher, so I switched over to education. But then I took geology, and it was such a great and interesting course, I decided to major in geology. But then when I took, as I mentioned, when I took Bob Thomas's course, Introduction to Literature, I knew I had come to the place that I belonged. And so I took every course that Bob taught, American literature, the Book of Mormon. I can't remember all of the classes, but he was such a great teacher and such a good thinker. And so I also took courses from people like Hugh Nibley, who was a great scholar and interesting teacher and later became a good friend. So I studied during those years. I got on the debate squad. Cleon Skousen was my debate teacher. That was an interesting experience because I went to debate tournaments, different places in the Intermountain area, the West Coast. I became a cheerleader for BYU and was involved in the Viking Social Unit, which was the precursor of fraternities, sororities on campus. That is, I don't think they have them, but these social units were like fraternities. I became a Viking, and that was also a good experience in terms of camaraderie. So being at BYU was a rich experience. I remember when I was just a freshman, I decided it was time for me to go to the temple. So I remember, I was 17, maybe not, or maybe just turned 18. I remember hitchhiking down to Manti to go to the Manti Temple and finding it a beautiful experience to go to the Salt Lake Temple. When I first went to BYU, the entire student body met in one branch. It was called Campus Branch. We met in the Joseph Smith building. And then they divided it into two branches. And again, it was a wonderful experience to be going to church with so many friends and so many fellow students. I had a number of really lovely experiences. I would come home at Christmas and work at the post office in order to make money. I didn't have money to go to school, so I had to work all the time I was in school. First year I worked as a janitor. I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and clean out the engineering building, preparing it for class. I worked in what was called the Cougar Eat, which was a cafeteria in the Joseph Smith building. I remember working as a model for art classes. They don't do nude models at BYU, so I had a little short, kind of like the swimming trunks I wore. Interesting experience. I didn't look at any of this was a portrait class. I didn't look at any of the portraits until at the very end, and I went around and looked at all of the portraits, and they all looked like the artist rather than me. At least it seemed to me.